I lay in my penthouse bedroom, the silence ringing louder than the city traffic below. People ask why I cut them off. Why I chose nuclear winter over a simple family feud. The answer is simple. For years, my family ignored my success, planning to steal my money from my golden brother. So, I gave my overlooked sister a free house at her graduation. My dad's reaction. That money was for his loans. That memory burned hotter than the fever I was currently fighting. My body felt encased in lead, the remnants of a nasty flu that had flattened me for 4 days. I reached for the water glass on the nightstand, my hand trembling slightly. The phone buzzed against the marble surface, vibrating like an angry hornet. I expected a check in from a friend or a business partner concerned about the silence. Instead, my mother's name lit up the screen. There was no "get well soon," or even, "how are you?" Just a text demand. "Call now, urgent, finances." I let it ring twice before swiping to answer, my voice scraping against my throat like sandpaper. "Hello, Mom." She didn't waste a breath on pleasantries. "Austin, finally. Your father is frantic. We have a situation with the accounts." Her tone wasn't worried, it was accusatory, as if my illness were a personal inconvenience. She explained a sudden, catastrophic tax error requiring immediate liquidity. $50,000. Today. She spoke the number casually, like ordering a sandwich, assuming my wallet was simply hers to open. "It's a clerical mistake," she insisted, her voice tight. "But if we don't wire it by 5, the penalties are severe." I closed my eyes, trying to process the logic through the haze of medication. That's when I heard it. A distinct, muffled chuckle in the background. It was the sound of a video game, followed by the pop of a soda can. Caleb. My brother wasn't frantic about taxes. He was lounging on the sofa, laughing at something on the TV, completely unbothered. The adrenaline spiked, clearing the fog in my brain instantly. My parents claimed poverty, yet Caleb was clearly home, unemployed as usual, and perfectly relaxed. If the IRS were truly knocking down the door, he would be the first one sweating. "Austin, are you listening?" My mother snapped. "I hear you," I whispered, my grip on the phone tightening until my knuckles turned white. They didn't need tax money. They needed to cover Caleb's tracks again. I ended the call without another word. I tossed the phone onto the duvet and dragged myself into a sitting position. The silence returned, but the peace was gone. A moment later, a different notification pinged, a security alert from my bank. Failed login attempt. IP address recognized. It was my father's old desktop computer. They hadn't just called for a loan. They were trying to break into the vault, while I was too sick to notice. They weren't asking for help. They were declaring war, and I was ready to fight. The chill in my bedroom felt like ice against my fevered skin. I stared at the security alert on my screen. My father was no hacker, but he had my old childhood passwords saved in a dusty notebook. He was hunting for my corporate routing numbers, while I lay shivering. I realized then that my success was just a harvest to them. They didn't see a sun. They saw a ledger. I needed to move before they struck again. I dragged myself to the bathroom and splashed cold water on my face. The mirror showed a ghost with hollow eyes and a jaw set in stone. I grabbed my laptop and initiated a global password reset for every linked account. My hands were steady now, fueled by a cold, surgical anger. I also sent a cryptic text to my forensic accountant Sloan. I needed a full audit of the family home. The game had finally changed. An hour later, my sister Maya called. Her voice was small and brittle. She was finishing her final shift before graduation at the university clinic. "Austin, Mom is talking about a family cruise," she whispered. She says you're paying for everyone to celebrate Caleb's new venture. I gripped the edge of the mahogany desk. They were spending my money in their heads before they even stole it. Maya deserved better than being their next financial safety net. Don't worry about the cruise, Maya, I said, my voice dropping an octave. Just focus on your boards. I have a different plan for your graduation. I could hear her sigh of relief through the speaker. She didn't ask for details, and I didn't offer any. She knew the family dynamic was a sinking ship. She just didn't know I was the one pulling the plug. I hung up and saw Sloane's first urgent report hit my inbox. The data was staggering. My father hadn't just missed a tax payment. He had taken out 3 predatory loans to cover Caleb's gambling debts at a local underground casino. The family home was leveraged to the hilt. One missed payment would trigger a total foreclosure. They were drowning, and they were trying to pull me under to use as a raft. My father wasn't just desperate. He was dangerous. I felt the house shaking. I scrolled deeper into the PDF. Sloane had found something even worse. Caleb wasn't just losing money. He was signing the loans with Maya's forged signature. They were planning to ruin her credit before she even started her career. My stomach turned. This wasn't just greed. It was a calculated sacrifice of the only innocent person left in that house. I realized I couldn't just say no. I had to burn their entire world down. I reached for my keys and a heavy coat. The flu was still there, but the mission was clearer than the Texas sky. I had to visit a real estate broker I knew in the city. There was a small, brick bungalow for sale near the hospital where Maya wanted to work. I would buy it today. If my parents wanted to play with deeds and debts, I would show them how a real professional handled a closing. I drove through the neon-soaked streets of Fort Worth, the steering wheel slicked beneath my palms. My objective was simple. Secure the brick bungalow before my father could leverage my name for another loan. The cold night air bit at my lungs, but the internal fire kept the flu at bay. I pulled up to the broker's office, a glass-fronted building that looked like a jagged tooth. My phone buzzed again. It was a message from Caleb. Hey bro, Dad says you're being difficult about the taxes. Don't be a jerk. I deleted the text without reading it twice. Inside, the broker waited with a stack of papers and a lukewarm coffee. He looked tired, but his eyes sharpened when he saw my expression. The seller wants a fast closing, Austin. All cash, no contingencies. I nodded and reached for my pen. This house was Maya's exit ramp. I was her only hope. The obstacle hit me as I signed the third page. My father hadn't just tried to log into my bank. He had filed a fraudulent dependency claim with my primary lender. The broker's computer flagged my account for a temporary freeze. There's a hold on the wire, Austin. Someone reported you as mentally incapacitated using a forged medical directive. I felt a vein throb in my temple. My father was playing dirty, using the flu as a weapon to lock my assets. I leaned back, taking a slow breath. This was a tactical error on his part. He assumed I operated only through traditional banks. I pulled out my laptop and accessed my private trust, a legal fortress he knew nothing about. I routed the funds through an offshore LLC I had built years ago for international expansion. The power balance shifted in a few keystrokes. Try the wire again, I said softly. The broker hit the refresh button. The screen flashed green. The funds were cleared, bypassing the fraudulent freeze entirely. We're good to go, the broker said, sounding impressed. I took the keys to the bungalow, feeling their weight in my pocket. They were heavy, cold, and final. Maya was officially a homeowner, even if she didn't know it yet. But as I walked to my car, I saw a familiar black SUV parked across the street. My father was watching me. He didn't pull away when I stared him down. He just sat there, his face a shadowed mask behind the tinted glass. He knew I had moved the money, but he didn't know where it went. He likely thought I had just paid the taxes. He demanded. I got into my car and locked the doors. The hunt had begun. He wasn't just after my cash anymore. He was trying to track my every move. I checked my rearview mirror as I drove toward the hospital. Maya was finishing her shift in 10 minutes. I needed to warn her about the forged signatures Sloan had found. But as I pulled into the parking garage, my phone lit up with a video call. It was Caleb, but he wasn't in his room. He was standing inside my penthouse apartment. He had a spare key I forgot existed. Nice place, Austin. Let's talk about that house. I gripped the steering wheel as Caleb panned the camera around my living room. The glint of my award trophies mirrored the predatory look in his eyes. My objective was to get him out of my home without giving up my position. Get out of my house, Caleb, I said, my voice vibrating with a low, dangerous frequency. He just laughed and flopped onto my designer sofa. Dad saw you at the broker's office. Why are you buying real estate now? The pressure mounted as I watched him reach for a vintage bottle of scotch on my sideboard. He didn't know about the trust, but he knew I was spending large sums of cash. It is an investment, I lied, keeping my tone flat. Caleb smirked and unscrewed the cap. Dad says you owe the family. That house belongs to the team, Austin. We need the equity to clear my slate. He was already treating my property like his personal piggy bank. I pulled over into a dark corner of the hospital parking garage. I needed to shift the power dynamic before he found my sensitive files. Check the drawer under the television, Caleb, I said calmly. He frowned but obeyed, sliding the heavy oak panel open. He found a single printed page I had left there months ago. It was a formal trespass warning and a security protocol summary. His smirk vanished as he read the legal language. I updated the smart locks 10 minutes ago. I lied, though I was actually doing it on my laptop. The police will be there in 5 minutes if the biometrics do not match. Caleb jumped off the sofa, spilling the scotch on the rug. He looked toward the door, his bravado evaporating. You're calling the cops on your own brother. I didn't answer. I just watched the video feed as he scrambled toward the exit, cursing my name. He vanished from the screen, and I locked the deadbolts remotely with a heavy click. My home was secure, but the war was escalating into the physical world. I sat in the dark car, my heart hammering against my ribs. I had won the moment, but the cost was rising. I looked up and saw Maya walking toward the garage elevators. She looked exhausted, her scrubs wrinkled and stained. She was the reason I was fighting this. I intercepted her before she reached her car. Maya, we need to talk. Now. She jumped, then relaxed when she saw it was me. I told her about the forged signatures and the loans Caleb had tied to her name. Her face went pale under the harsh fluorescent lights. They wouldn't do that, she whispered, though her shaking hands said otherwise. I showed her the digital copies Sloan had sent. The betrayal was written in black and white. Maya leaned against a concrete pillar, her breath hitching in the cold air. What do we do? She asked, her voice barely audible. I reached into my pocket and felt the cold brass of the new house keys. We go to dinner tomorrow. We act like everything is normal. I promised her a way out, but I didn't tell her about the black SUV. I looked toward the garage entrance. My father was there, idling at the gate. I stared at the black SUV idling near the garage exit. My objective was to get Maya to safety, without leading our father straight to the bungalow. The cold air smelled of exhaust and damp concrete. "Get in my car," I commanded, keeping my eyes on the flickering headlights across the lot. Maya obeyed, her movements jerky and stiff. She was a ghost of herself. I put the car in gear, my heart thumping a jagged rhythm against my ribs. The pressure mounted as the SUV pulled out behind us. Our father wasn't hiding his intent anymore. He followed at a fixed distance, a shark trailing a bleeding swimmer. "Is that him?" Maya whispered, her fingers digging into the leather armrest. I didn't answer. I just focused on the road, weaving through the light evening traffic of Fort Worth. Every turn I made, the black shadow mirrored. He was waiting for me to lead him to the prize. I took a sharp right into a crowded shopping center, hoping to lose him in the sprawl. I needed a turn that he wouldn't expect. "We're going to my office first." I lied for the benefit of any bugs he might have planted. But then, my phone buzzed with an encrypted message from Sloan. It contained a photo of a legal document recently filed at the courthouse. My father had applied for emergency temporary guardianship over me, citing my recent severe illness. The power balance shifted instantly. He wasn't just after my money. He was trying to legally erase my autonomy. If a judge signed that paper, my trust would become his playground. I pulled into a dark alleyway behind a row of closed warehouses and cut the lights. The SUV overshot the turn, its brake lights glowing like angry embers in the distance. I had a narrow window to act. I needed a lawyer, and I needed him now. "Stay here," I told Maya, stepping out into the biting wind. I pulled a secondary phone from my glove box, one my family had never seen. I dialed my corporate attorney and told him to file a pre-emptive strike. We would challenge the guardianship immediately, using my private doctor's records to prove my mental clarity before the dinner started. I felt the flu flare up, but I suppressed the urge to cough. Weakness was no longer an option. I was fighting for my life. I looked back at Maya through the glass. She was staring at her own reflection, her eyes wide with a realization she couldn't voice. She looked down at the house keys I had placed in her hand. She finally understood that I was burning every bridge to save her. I got back inside and started the engine. The SUV had turned around and was creeping back toward our hiding spot. We had to move. The graduation dinner was tomorrow night. We sped away, but a new complication appeared on the dashboard. My car's GPS had been remotely overridden. The screen displayed a map with a single destination: my parents' house in Arlington. The doors clicked shut, locked by an external signal. My father had used the incapacitated claim to trigger the car's safety recovery mode. We weren't driving to the hospital or the bungalow. The car was taking us straight into the heart of the trap. The car glided through the Arlington suburbs, steered by an invisible hand. I gripped the door handle, but the electronic locks remained frozen. Maya sat beside me, her knuckles white as she clutched the bungalow keys. "Austin, do something," she whispered. I reached under the dashboard and ripped the plastic panel away, exposing a nest of colored wires. My objective was to kill the car's cellular uplink before we reached the driveway. The engine hummed with terrifying, automated precision. We were moving targets. I found the telematics module tucked near the steering column. My fever spiked, sweat stinging my eyes as I worked by the dim glow of the streetlights. If I failed, we would be delivered to my father like a package. I grabbed a pair of wire cutters from my center console. With a sharp snip, the GPS screen flickered and died. The steering wheel suddenly felt heavy and loose in my hands. I slammed the brakes, and we skidded to a halt. The silence that followed was deafening. I kicked the door, and this time, the mechanical override clicked. We were free from the car, but the black SUV roared around the corner, its headlights blinding us. My father had anticipated the manual shutdown. He knew this neighborhood better than I did. "Run for the park," I told Maya, pointing toward a dark line of trees. I grabbed my laptop bag and the legal documents. We had to disappear into the shadows. We scrambled over a low stone wall, the damp grass soaking my shoes. My lungs burned with every breath, the flu still clawing at my chest. We reached the center of the park, where a stone pavilion stood. I opened my laptop, using my phone as a secure hotspot. I needed to see what else Sloan had found before the dinner. The power balance shifted as a new file downloaded. It was a digital recording from a security camera inside Caleb's favorite casino. The footage was crystal clear. It showed my father handing a thick stack of cash to a man with a scared neck. The timestamps matched the date of my last corporate dividend payment. He wasn't just paying Caleb's debts. He was using my brother's addiction to launder money for a local crime syndicate. Caleb wasn't the golden child. He was the fall guy. My father had been using both of us to keep his own hands clean. I felt sick. "What is it?" Maya asked, shivering in the wind. I turned the screen so she could see the betrayal. She watched our father shake hands with the criminal, her face turning into a mask of pure grief. The realization hit her like a physical blow. Our family was a front for a desperate man's crimes. She didn't cry. Instead, she stood up straighter, her eyes turning cold and sharp. "He's going to prison," she said. I nodded, closing the laptop. We heard the crunch of footsteps on the gravel path. My father appeared, his coat billowing in the breeze. He looked like a statesman, but his eyes were empty. "Give me the laptop, Austin," he said, his voice terrifyingly calm. He held a heavy manila envelope in his hand. "I have the guardianship papers signed by a judge. You are officially unfit to manage your affairs." He stepped into the light, a smug smile playing on his lips. He thought he won. I stood my ground, holding the laptop like a shield. "The judge might change his mind when he sees your casino footage," I countered. His smile faltered, the blood draining from his face. He looked at Maya, then back at me. "You think you're so smart," he hissed. "But that money belongs to the family legacy. It belongs to Caleb's future." He didn't even mention Maya. He had already written her out of his world. He moved closer, reaching out. Maya stepped forward, blocking his path. She held up the bungalow keys I had given her. "The legacy is dead, Dad," she said. Her voice didn't shake. She looked him in the eye and saw the monster underneath. He recoiled as if she had struck him. He realized he had lost his leverage over her. I checked my watch. The graduation dinner was less than 20 hours away. I had the evidence I needed to end this cycle of abuse. I led Maya back toward the street, leaving our father standing alone in the dark. He didn't follow us this time. He knew the video was a death sentence. But as we reached a main road to hail a cab, my phone buzzed with a final alert. Sloan had found one more detail. The house I bought for Maya was once owned by the same syndicate. It was the location of the casino's main vault. My father hadn't just watched me. He led me there. The cold reality of the vault location hit me like a physical blow. My objective was to secure Maya, but the bungalow was a trap. The syndicate would surely come for their property. I hailed a cab, my hands shaking from the lingering flu and the sudden influx of terror. We sped away from the park, leaving my father in the shadows. I checked the deed in the laptop light, searching for any legal loopholes. The pressure was suffocating. We were being hunted by ghosts. I contacted Sloan, my voice a jagged rasp in the quiet cab. "Is the vault active?" I demanded. He spent a minute scanning property histories and police reports from the last decade. The turn came when he found a sealed architectural plan. The vault wasn't just a room, it was the foundation. The brick bungalow sat on a reinforced concrete slab that the city had never officially inspected. My purchase had inadvertently legalized a criminal stronghold. My father had tricked me into being their newest landlord. Maya looked at the keys as if they were poisoned. She realized her dream of freedom was built on a crime scene. I told the driver to change course for my corporate warehouse in Fort Worth. It was the only place with enough physical security to keep her safe tonight. I needed to leverage my own resources to dismantle this scheme. The drive was a blur of neon lights and mounting dread. I could feel invisible net tightening around us. Every shadow in the rearview mirror looked like the syndicate coming for their vault. We reached the warehouse, a fortress of steel and cameras. I ushered Maya inside the server room, the hum of the cooling fans providing a mechanical lullaby. My lungs still burned, but I had work to do. I pulled up the guardianship papers my father had brandished. They were notarized by a man Sloan had already identified as a syndicate associate. Every move they made was interconnected. I began drafting a counter-suit, attaching the casino footage as primary evidence. They were falling. By dawn, the legal strike was ready for filing. I had moved my personal assets into a frozen state, ensuring no one could touch them until the hearing. I looked at Maya, who was sleeping on a pile of server manuals. She looked peaceful, but her world was about to end. I walked to the loading dock and watched the sun rise over the Texas horizon. I felt a strange sense of clarity. The dinner was only hours away now. I received a final text from my father. "See you tonight, Austin. Don't be late for the celebration." The subtext was clear. If I didn't show up and play my part, the syndicate would take matters into their own hands. They expected me to sign the guardianship papers at the table. I adjusted my suit and checked the encrypted drive in my pocket. I wasn't going there to surrender. I was going there to deliver a final, public execution. I arrived at the restaurant, the same upscale steakhouse, where we always performed our family theater. The air smelled of expensive wine and charred meat. My parents were already seated, looking perfectly composed in their finery. Caleb sat next to them, tapping his fingers on the white tablecloth. He looked jittery, his eyes darting toward the entrance. He knew the stakes were higher than a simple loan. They were all waiting for the check to arrive and save them. Maya walked in behind me, wearing a dress I had ordered for her graduation. She looked stunning and resolute. My father's eyes narrowed when he saw her. He didn't expect her to show up after the park confrontation. "Sit down, children," my mother said, her smile like a cracked porcelain mask. We took our seats, the tension radiating from the center of the table. The waiter poured the wine, but no one touched their glass. The final act was beginning. I reached into my bag and pulled out the first envelope. I didn't hand it to my father. I placed it in front of Maya. "This is for your graduation," I said loudly enough for the neighboring tables to hear. She opened it and pulled out the deed. My father's face went white. He thought I was giving her the vault. He reached out to grab it, but I caught his wrist. My grip was like a steel vise. "Not yet, Dad." The restaurant fell silent as my father leaned in, his voice a low hiss of pure venom. He couldn't help himself anymore. The desperation finally broke through the statesman's fuckhead. He looked at the deed, then at Caleb's terrified face. He blurted out the words that ended everything. That money was for his loans. He stood up, his chair scraping against the floor. He realized too late that the neighboring table was full of the lawyers I had hired. The silence in the steakhouse was brittle. My father remained frozen, his arm extended toward the deed, like a starving man reaching for bread. He had finally admitted the truth in front of everyone. The lawyers at the next table stood up in unison, their presence acting as a physical barrier. My objective was complete. The confession was recorded on 3 different phones. I let go of his wrist. He slumped back into his leather chair, looking suddenly very old and small. Caleb began to shake, his eyes darting toward the restaurant exit. He knew the syndicate wouldn't care about the legal drama. They wanted their money, and my father had just signaled to the room that the well was dry. "It is over, Caleb," I said. I looked at my mother, who was meticulously folding her napkin, as if she could ignore the carnage. She wouldn't look at me. She only had eyes for her golden son, who was currently falling apart. Maya stood up, clutching the folder to her chest. She looked at our parents, with a pity that was more devastating than anger. "I am moving into that house tomorrow," she announced, her voice steady despite knowing the truth. My father looked up, a cruel glint returning to his eyes. "You will be sleeping on a crime scene," he hissed, thinking the bungalow was still her only option. He still thought the vault was his leverage. He didn't know I had already called the police. The turn happened as the front doors opened. Instead of the syndicate muscle my father expected, 4 detectives walked toward our table. Sloan had tipped them off about the concrete slab and the illegal foundation. My father's statesman persona disintegrated completely. He tried to hide the manila, one envelope under the table. But a detective reached out to intercept it. The guardianship papers were now evidence in a racketeering investigation. The air in the room felt lighter. I watched as they led my father away in handcuffs. He didn't scream or fight. He just stared at me with a hollow, haunting intensity. My mother followed him out, sobbing into her silk scarf, without a backward glance at Maya or me. Caleb slipped out through the kitchen, likely running for a border he would never reach. I was left standing at the table with my sister. The bill arrived, and for once, I did not mind paying the price. We walked out into the cool Texas night together. Maya leaned against me, her strength finally wavering as the adrenaline faded. "What happens to the house now?" she asked. I checked my phone. The police had already cordoned off the bungalow to excavate the vault. The property would be tied up in court for years. I reached into my pocket and handed her a different set of keys. I had bought a second, smaller condo, in my own name months ago. A secret fallback plan I never thought I would actually need. I had secured it as a quiet investment for her, when she first mentioned wanting her own space, far from the family's reach.